So when we naturally breathe, what happens is, our brain sends signals through two phrenic nerves, left and right, that are connected to the diaphragm muscles, and the diaphragm muscle contracts. When diaphragm muscle contracts, it generates a negative pressure in thoracic cavity. And with that negative pressure, the lungs expand, and that's how we naturally breathe. But when patients are put on mechanical ventilator, um, because mechanical ventilator is very uncomfortable, and they come with some sort of injury to them, you know that they needed to be sedated. Mechanical ventilator takes over all the work of breathing, and diaphragm becomes inactive. And mechanical ventilation is positive pressure ventilation, right? um, so with diaphragm being inactive, it atrophies very, very quickly. It loses half of its size, within 18 to 69 hours,
Wow.
right? The diaphragm is like an unsung hero of breathing. It does all the heavy lifting, but unlike abs, you can't show it off at the gym. Um,
True. Welcome to the MedTech 101 podcast. And today we have something that I think everyone knows about, especially after the pandemic, because I think the cases were that if you got sick and your COVID was really bad, you'd end up on a ventilator. So today we're talking about ventilators, and but it's a special type of ventilator. It's not the one that I think a lot of people saw in the mainstream media. And but I'm joined by the Chief Operating Officer of LungPacer Medical, straight out of the US for all those international listeners we have today. So we're going to be trying to juggle a bit of the terminology between some of the systems they've introduced for their patients in the US. But it's really exciting. So yeah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me here, Rodney. I've been listening to your podcast, and you're doing great work, actually.
Thank you, thank you very much for that. So I think it's something that started off as a hobby essentially, but it's starting to get a little bit bigger than a hobby now because I actually have to create time for the podcast and not just wait to do it in my free time. But yeah, I mean, like your journey has been quite exciting, Vero. Like I think similar to me, like you also started in like R&D. I think R&D is quite exciting because you get to work on new devices and you have this like huge budgets, especially if you work for big companies. They give you this huge budget that you go in and you just like spend on trying to bring the best product to market. But your career has been quite exciting because you've since moved from R&D to like chief officer of like operations. Like so, like could you please tell us about your background leading to where you are right now?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Rodney. Again, I've been fortunate to spend more than 2 decades in MedTech, working on first-in-kind technologies that sit at the intersection of engineering and patient care. It all started when I was in my fourth grade. My mom was diagnosed, with um, a like she had a mitral wall regurgitation, because she had rheumatic fever when she was kid. And it got to that stage basically, where she was even unable to walk few steps, and she'll be breathing heavy. And one day, she was hospitalized basically, and my dad came to me. I was in my fourth grade, and told us basically that we may not see our mom. Um, so we were very taken by that. And fortunately, there was one of the new cardiothoracic surgeons, who started practice, in the city that I grew up in. And she went through surgery, and she got basically a mechanical mitral valve, and that saved her life. She was with us for 30 years, more than that, after that. So it changed my life that time, and I decided I want to do something like this. And that was my whole motivation towards working in a medical device industry basically. So I started with, I mean, my education is a mechanical engineering, and then I did my master's in mechanical biomedical engineering. And then I started for a company called Power Medical Interventions. It was a startup based in Philly, and we were developing robotic tissue stapling and cutting devices. After that, I moved to California, and I worked for a company called Radiant Medical. And there we were developing a catheter based therapy to do the temperature management and induce hypothermia. From there, I went to Boston Scientific and worked on guide wire filter for protecting when they're doing carotid stenting. So the emboli doesn't go up to the brain and cause a stroke. There's a filter that goes distally to protect that emboli from going upstream. Then I moved back to India, for a little while and worked for a company, that was doing cardiovascular stents and peripheral stents development. And then I moved to Canada, where eventually you know it, it led me to LungPacer, where the problem in hand was to tackle one of the biggest hidden problems in ICU, ventilator induced diaphragm dysfunction.
Yes, nice, nice. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of like what it is, and just I think a lot of people would have probably been thrown off guard with the term VIDD, which is ventilator induced diaphragm dysfunction. Like, and we're also going to be sharing some slides as well to show people. So if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcast, I would suggest you go over to the YouTube version of this episode. But yeah, it's okay. I'll let you continue, Vero. I didn't want people to lose you, and I wanted to let them know that there is something like a lot of great visuals that are with this episode. So it's quite exciting.
Yeah, so VIDD, as you mentioned, it's ventilator induced diaphragm dysfunction. So let me share my slide here. Um, So when we naturally breathe, what happens is, our brain sends signals through two phrenic nerves, left and right, that are connected to the diaphragm muscles, and the diaphragm muscle contracts. When diaphragm muscle contracts, it generates a negative pressure in thoracic cavity. And with that negative pressure, the lungs expand, and that's how we naturally breathe. But when patients are put on mechanical ventilator, um, because mechanical ventilator is very uncomfortable, and they come with some sort of injury to them, that they needed to be sedated. Mechanical ventilator takes over all the work of breathing, and diaphragm becomes inactive. And mechanical ventilation is positive pressure ventilation, right? So with diaphragm being inactive, it atrophies very, very quickly. It loses half of its size, within 18 to 69 hours,
Wow.
right? The diaphragm is like an unsung hero of breathing. It does all the heavy lifting, but unlike abs, you can't show it off at the gym. Um,
True.
yeah. So, with diaphragm being inactive and positive pressure, being filled in the lungs, basically, there's a lot of consequences, that happens with these patients. So, like we talked about muscle being atrophying or being weak, right? And it happens very, very fast. So when patients, let's say they come, with pneumonia or some other injury, right? They're put on mechanical ventilator, and now pneumonia is cured or respiratory disease is cured. Now it's time for them to breathe on their own, but they can't breathe on their own, because the diaphragm is very, very weak. The other thing that happens, is when we breathe naturally, our lungs basically are getting air through negative pressure ventilation. So the distribution of air within the lungs, is from bottom to top. But now ventilator is pushing air, and with that pushing of air, the bottom of the lungs basically do not get any air and they collapse and fluid gets filled into them. The term is atelectasis. And then the top of the lungs basically are getting overstretched. So, barotrauma. So that also injures lungs, that makes patients to breathe on their own difficult. The other thing that is diaphragm just not is a respiratory muscle, but it helps in getting the cardiovascular return of venous blood into the heart, right? Because it pumps the belly basically, and then the venous blood gets back to the heart. As well as when patients are put on mechanical ventilator, the positive pressure increases their pulmonary arterial resistance. So now heart has to work harder, to circulate the blood, throughout the body. There's other, thing that is very recently known is, when patients are put on mechanical ventilator, they get cognitive impairment, because we have a feedback mechanism, from lungs to the brain, right? When we are breathing properly, brain gets signal, okay, everything is fine, right? But when we need some more air, brain will get signal that we need air, and the diaphragm will contract. When patients are put on mechanical ventilator, the top of the lungs are saying, oh, I'm getting too much air. The bottom of the lungs are saying, I'm not getting enough air, right? So this confusing signal to the brain, causes inflammation in brain, right? And patients do go through the cognitive impairment, when they're put on mechanical ventilator. And when patients are in ICU for a longer duration where they're unable to wean, there is high likelihood that they can cause infection, from the hospital too, and that can prolong their recovery. So there are many, many, many things, that happens, when patients are put on mechanical ventilator. Mechanical ventilator is life saving, but there is a consequence for patients to go on mechanical ventilator.
True. And that makes a lot of sense, really, because I guess that's why some people, for example, do get worried about like a particular type of like illness, but from just being in hospital. So you do have a certain population that don't want to go to hospital until it's critical, and when they get to hospital, they don't want to be put on ventilators because I think there's a lot of people that do trust or do distrust the technology, right? And I guess that's what makes the next part we're going to be talking about quite exciting, like because like not only do we need some mechanical like support and we need all these medical devices, but the nice thing about technology is that there's always this constant improvement, right? And that takes us to like what the exciting parts I think of this episode, which is the AeroPace system from LungPacer. So like what could you tell us about this system? And I know recently you guys have an FDA approval, so that means you can now sell this device on the markets. And I think obviously we'll talk about the challenges of that come after an FDA approval later on. But I'll let you tell us more about this new system you have.
Yeah. So the problem in hand, when we started to develop this product, was diaphragm dysfunction, when patients are put on mechanical ventilator. So, the concept that we came up with, is a central line-based, catheter that has electrodes on it, that goes i- through the normal pathway. Physicians are used to putting the central line basically, in every patient, and these ICU patients need those central lines. So the catheter goes through the routine, left jugular or left subclavian. It has electrodes on it, and we transvenously stimulate the phrenic nerves, that control the diaphragm. So now, when patients are put on mechanical ventilator, we can induce the, neurostimulation and contract the diaphragm and generate the negative pressure. So when patients are put on mechanical ventilator, their diaphragm is active. And now with generating the negative pressure, we are reducing the harmful effect of positive pressure mechanical ventilation as well. We just got an approval, from FDA, the pre-market approval in December of 2024. Um, the device was, designated as a breakthrough designation, from FDA. Um, so we just got the approval, so we're very excited about that.
So that's really exciting, really. I think when we look at that system and what makes it special. I mean, you do have the sort of like the catheter that goes way deeper into the lungs. Does that help distribute the like the air circulation in the lungs in comparison to like the challenges the mechanical ventilators faced in the past of not being able to access the lower parts of the lungs? Like, how does this overcome that issue?
Absolutely. I mean, the AeroPace catheter doesn't go inside the lungs. It's in the central venous system, of the patients. Um, so these patients, for drug delivery and blood sampling and everything, they do need a central line. So it's very similar to the, any other central line that is existing in the market right now. Um, with electrodes on it, we can target the phrenic nerves. and phrenic nerves will contract the diaphragm. And with that exercise, we are able to uh, rebuild the muscle strength, basically, or and help patients wean off faster.
Nice, nice. That's really good. That makes a lot of sense actually. And yeah, my mistake because I think it's quite exciting to learn about how you can make certain parts of your body move by stimulating a particular nerve. It just shows you how crazy the human body is, and it's quite fascinating. But another thing as well that you guys have added on is the new technology like add-on payment, like for I mean for people outside of the US, we can't I wouldn't know what that is. Like, could you please explain what that means?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, there are two things that we got. One was the breakthrough device designation from FDA. What breakthrough device program is, it's FDA's way of fast tracking game-changing innovative medical devices that could dramatically improve, the 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 treatment paradigm, for serious or life-threatening conditions, right? Um, the To qualify, for a breakthrough device program, the device has to address serious or life-threatening illness, and there has to be no other solution basically that exists for these patients, for that particular life-threatening condition. It has to show potential for, being effective, as well as, safe, right? So we received the FDA breakthrough designation, and with that, the NTAP, or new technology add-on payment, is a Medicare payment policy, that provides temporary additional reimbursement to hospitals for new medical technologies. So we received that as well. To qualify for NTAP, again, the devices has to show that they are safe and effective, and they're addressing basically, an unmet need, um, and those have not yet fully reflected in standard payment rates. So this program was created to encourage early adoption, of innovative technologies by helping cover the gap, between cost as well as the reimbursement. So with FDA breakthrough designation as well as the NTAP, those are just not the milestone. They're proof that, this device is gonna solve an unmet need, as well as it's gonna help patients improve their outcomes, as well as, potentially save lives.
Nice. And just one more thing to add on there is that for people listening, if a device is given like a breakthrough designation, it means it also gets to market faster because traditionally medical devices might take even up to 7 or 9 years to get to market. But if it's something that's crucial, as Vero said, like it's basically needs to get on the market faster, right? So the people can have access to it, and then afterwards, I would feel bad for the guys who are coming afterwards because like the standard has been kind of set, and now it will take longer for them. So that's really fantastic news, really, and I'm happy to hear that it's now coming out, and obviously, you guys probably the next challenge you have now is probably to do with the logistics of like distributing this across the US and stuff. And is it one of the challenges that you guys are facing now? Because obviously, the next thing I was going to ask you was, okay, it's great you have this new technology and it's exciting, but like, what challenges are you facing? Do you have to overcome logistical issues? Do you have to convince doctors that this device is actually safe compared to what they're used to? Because sometimes you might get conservative doctors who are probably not the first ones to they don't want to be the first ones to adopt a new technology. So like what could you tell us about the challenges you're experiencing?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, if you look at the problem, right, there are 2.5 million patients, that require mechanical ventilation annually, right? You know, 40% patients, die, up to 40% patients, they die on mechanical ventilator. And, more than 38% patients, or approximately 38% patients, remain on mechanical ventilation, more than 4 days, right? Um, and ventilator induced diaphragm dysfunction, is relatively new. In 2009 is when, Dr. Levine published a paper in New England Journal, and that's where, it became, the talk of the respiratory world, basically. I think people knew that the diaphragm, atrophies, right? But that being the biggest problem, is the new thing, right? So, I think it's going to take some efforts, convince physicians basically that this is the technology that can help, right? But there is a lot of clinical data that we have in our rescue 2 and rescue 3 studies that were just published, that we have shown that we can reduce the ventilator time by 3 days on an average. We can improve the diaphragm strength by 50%. We can reduce the reintubation risk by 60%, and 35% patients more wean with lung pacer therapy at day 30. So there's a lot of clinical evidence to support the adaption. But again, ICU is a cost center, right? And there's not much innovation in ICU because it being a cost center. But I think I'm confident that this technology will be adapted. The reason why is because AeroPace system not only have potential to improve outcomes of millions of critically ill patients and potentially save lives by exercising the diaphragm muscles and helping them wean faster. But by weaning them faster there is a significant economic value proposition to the ICU to save overall cost for the care of the patient. So I'm confident that we will overcome that challenge, and we have a great leadership in working towards that.
Well, well, no, that's really great, and I think that's something that's quite good to hear. And in terms of your like your distribution, what's like I mean, from your like what's been your reception like from like the physicians that will be like using these devices? Like, has it been a positive one? Has it been one of curiosity, or is it like a negative one? What would you say?
Yeah, I think it's overall positive. I think our team is getting traction um, that we thought we're going to get based on the economic value proposition and people knowing that the problem does exist for mechanically ventilated patients. It's very hard to see patients that are stuck on mechanical ventilator, right? And these physicians want to do everything that they can to help these patients, and especially like respiratory therapists, they don't have any tool that is currently available for them to help these patients. The current standard of care is ventilator liberation trial or spontaneous breathing trials, right? Where patients basically the ventilator support is reduced, and patients are asked to breathe on their own. They get anxious, they have tube going through their throat, they can't speak. So it really is not a tool to help patients basically wean faster, but that's the tool that is available today. So seeing this tool, we are seeing clinicians are very, very excited about this tool and the potential of this tool to help patients.
Nice, nice. That's really exciting to hear. And like, I think for most people, like listening to this episode right now, on like on the MedTech 101 podcast, like what you just said, even though you got approval and it's on the market since December, and like that's almost like 10 months in, it still sounds, it will sound like something that's quite futuristic, but it's quite exciting to say, okay, guys, this is what we have now. This is the current state of the technology we have. So so the question is like based on what we have right now, which is the AeroPace system, like which is great, works on nerves. Like where do you think the future is going in terms of like working to improve ventilation in patients in ICU?
Yeah. So, I mean, currently, the AeroPace system, and the way it helps patient is exercising the diaphragm muscles, right, to wean them off faster. But in future, I can see, as soon as patients are put on mechanical ventilator, using lung pacer or phrenic nerve pacing, device basically, to induce the negative pressure along with the positive pressure, so that their diaphragms are never atrophied, their lungs are never injured, they don't have this cognitive impairment, right? The cardiovascular support, is there from the diaphragm because diaphragm is contracting, right? And in future, based on the technology that is, coming, like artificial intelligence and everything, the algorithms and everything are going to be, so advanced and, good, basically, that there may be a way, that we may be able to ventilate patients just by negative pressure ventilation through neurostimulation and not requiring any harmful positive pressure ventilation, right? That's the vision that I have. So imagine a world, where we no longer have a fear being put on mechanical ventilator. That's the vision.
Nice, nice. Thank you very much. So I think that's a bright future that's coming on, or that's coming for us, and the fear of ventilators will go and will die down. Because I think during COVID that was a fear. So it's nice to know that one of the fears people had, like across the world, is being worked on and it's basically coming to an end. And yeah, but thank you very much, Vero, for coming on the podcast. I think that was quite informative. Thank you.
Thank you for having me here, Rodney.